Hello and welcome to Antinatalism this week. There was a paper, Antinatalism as an Ethical Choice, a Buddhist perspective on ethical rejection of procreation by Sonam Sultana and others from Jadavpur University in India. Now, this is not the first time that antinatalism and Buddhism are studied together. We've seen this in the works of Masahiro Morioka as well as in the book by Ken Coates, which is pen name of Ramesh Mishra, and the book was Antinatalism, Rejectionist Philosophy from Buddhism to Benetar. Anyway, the paper tries to draw parallels between antenatal philosophy and Buddhist religious framework. The main idea is that both antinatalism and Buddhism consider existence as a net harm or something to be negative. Buddhism's first noble truth is that life is suffering or dukkha as it is called, but they diverge on providing a solution for this harm. So, antinatalism says it is better to not have come into existence, and therefore, it is also better to not bring other beings into existence, other sentient beings. Whereas Buddhism focuses more on liberation from this cycle of suffering. Notice that Buddhism considers this as a cycle for a given being because it believes in rebirth after death. This cycle of birth, death, and rebirth is called samsara, and Buddhism preaches to get liberated from this cycle, which it calls as nirvana. The paper has a table showing antinatalist and Buddhist perspectives to different aspects. On the view towards existence, Buddhism sees life is suffering or dukkha. Antinatalism thinks existence is a net harm. I would qualify this one to say that one, it is sentient existence, and two, that coming into existence as being a net harm. So, what is a solution for this suffering? Buddhism preaches to attain nirvana or liberation, whereas antinatalism prefers avoiding birth or non existence. On the view of rebirth, Buddhism thinks that suffering exists and rebirth is undesirable but can be transcended, whereas antinatalism does not believe in rebirth at all. Buddhism and antinatalism differ on their stance about procreation. Buddhism encourages detachment but does not explicitly forbid procreation. Antinatalism rejects procreation as unethical. They also differ in what they want to achieve ultimately. For example, Buddhism wants the end of samsara, that is the cycle of rebirth, whereas antinatalism aims at prevention of suffering through non-existence. From an environmental point of view, Buddhism emphasizes non-violence or ahimsa, whereas antinatalism advocates reducing population burdens. Apart from this, there are more differences actually. For example, antinatalism is more or less a secular framework, whereas Buddhism comes with religious baggage. So, introducing Buddhism in topics related to bioethics might become problematic. Similarly, introducing antinatalism in some Buddhist traditions might be contradictory because without existence, there could be no liberation from the existence. And for this reason, the paper proposes a middle ground, which it calls spiritual antinatalism. The concept of spiritual antinatalism addresses this concern by rejecting metaphysical claims about the intrinsic superiority of non existence and instead emphasizing ethical intention, motivation, and compassion. In other words, don't think that non existence is in some way superior, but at the same time, instead of bringing new beings into existence, have a compassionate perspective towards those who already exist. That's my interpretation of this so called spiritual antinatalism. The paper further concludes that by proposing the concept of spiritual antinatalism, this study offers a middle position that integrates harm avoidance with ethical restraint without endorsing nihilism or denying the possibility of liberation. Now, as I said, this is not the first time that Buddhist thoughts and antinatalism are compared, and I don't agree with everything that is said in the paper, but still, it was interesting to read through. A new paper, Overshoot and Procreative Ethics at an Ecological Crossroads, was written by William Rees and Konrad Sochik. The paper is not on traditional ethical antinatalism but about environmental antinatalism. The central idea of paper is ecological overshoot, meaning humanity is using more resources than Earth can regenerate. Modern techno-industrial society is now operating beyond Earth's long-term carrying capacity, that is in ecological overshoot. And it's not just about climate change. The paper highlights a combination of crises: climate disruption, resource depletion, pollution, and biodiversity loss. Together, they could lead to something serious. Overshoot increases the likelihood of systems contraction and at least partial societal collapse within this century. It is common to blame consumption, but this paper says that's only half the story. Negative impacts on the ecosphere are the direct result of excessive consumption, but it is also the growing numbers of people who consume and pollute. So, even if everyone lives modestly, more people will be equal to more total damage. This presents with a conundrum which has two options and both of which lead to bad news. If we rapidly stop fossil fuels to avoid disastrous climate change, we would have collapsed economies and geopolitical chaos. If we remain largely dependent on fossil fuels, that is society's default position, and maintain the growth paradigm while supplies last, we would still have collapsed economies and geopolitical chaos. And so the paper asks us to look at the human population explosion. It took about 350,000 years to reach 1 billion, but in the next 200 years, we became 8 billion and growing. But talking about population in the context of policymaking is still frowned upon. Population remains a policy taboo because it is politically sensitive, it conflicts with economic growth, and it challenges personal freedom. And so instead, governments promote pronatalism, encouraging more births. But the question is, should having children be treated as a purely private choice? Why should procreative decisions be exempt from moral evaluation? Their answer is it shouldn't be because every new person consumes resources, produces waste, and adds pressure to an already collapsing system. They put it bluntly every additional human being is an additional dissipative structure. So, what's the solution? Should we force people not to have children? No, instead, the paper argues a new procreative ethics, smaller families, voluntary fertility reduction, universal access to contraception, and ending pronatalist incentives. And most importantly, a cultural shift. Population ethics should be at the center of environmental policy. The paper is very clear. Even if we fix consumption, population still matters. And without change, left untreated, overshoot is a terminal condition. The authors conclude with a warning. On its present course, there is nothing for modern techno industrial culture but to collapse. But they also say we still have a choice. We can ignore the problem or rethink how we live and reproduce. An article on countercurrents.org talks about connection between having or not having children and feminist activism. BirthStrike as a crucial part of feminist activism by Verena Brunschweiger. A birthstrike is essentially a deliberate decision not to have children for political reasons. The author connects this idea to bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. Whether or not you believe in abortion, you should believe in choice. The article argues that women are often treated as reproductive tools in society. It claims that pressure to have children is not neutral. It's tied to patriarchy, social expectations, and control over women's bodies. It's all about misogyny and controlling women as vessels of patriarchy. So, from this perspective, choosing not to have children becomes an act of resistance against that control. The argument is not just about individual choice, but about collective solidarity, supporting women who refuse motherhood. It also links BirthStrike to global issues like climate change, overpopulation, and rise of authoritarian ideologies. The idea is that bringing more people into a world facing these crises may be ethically questionable. What we need is more support for women and girls who do not want to contribute to overpopulation, fascism, environmental destruction, and anti feminism. This connects BirthStrike to a broader ethical stance, not creating a new life as a form of responsibility. The article doesn't just stay theoretical, it makes clear policy demands. It calls for free and universal access to contraception, strong pro choice policies, and support for sterilization for those who want it. Every person seeking sterilization should have our full support. So, yet another unexplored area of antinatalism, which is not having children for political resistance. Now, on to some notable videos. On The Dissenter was a slightly different format of the video this time, with three guests talking to Ricardo: Nandita Bajaj, Zachary Neal, and Jennifer Neal. This again was not a strictly antinatalism video. It was more about opposition to pronatalism and promotion of choice of being child free, but it provides many insights into the world of reproduction. One important aspect was that at many different times they fact checked claims made by Stephen J. Shaw in his his pro-natalist documentary Birth Gap, Shaw claims that there is a widespread involuntary childlessness among women today. He also claims in the documentary that once people have their first child, then they tend to go on to have larger families, meaning they just have to break the threshold of having their first child. Another claim is that we are heading towards population collapse. All of these claims are fact checked by the guests and they turn out to be false. So, very interesting discussion, and thanks to the dissenter for organizing this. Amanda Suknik was at the Virtues and Vices of Having Children conference, where she presented the paper Activism as Good Perversion that she wrote along with Mati Hairi. In the presentation, she introduced Mary Ew. I don't know how to say her last name, but she was late 19th, early 20th century French feminist, poet, animal rights activist, and what we would call today as an antinatalist and an ethicist. In the talk, Amanda introduced Mary's arguments, the work that she had done, the concepts of ephilism, as well as Amanda's new concept of needians. Amanda tried to locate all of these in Aristotelian ethics and also presented multiple syllogisms to make her point. So, a very interesting talk, and I'm still looking forward to read that paper, Ephilism as Good Perversion. A big channel, Matthias Benitez, with 100,000 subscribers, made a video talking about and refuting Benatar's asymmetry. He explains the asymmetry cursorily before criticizing it. The video is in Portuguese, but I could listen to it in the auto-dubbed version. His main criticisms were twofold. He accused Benatar of reducing life to equations of pain and pleasure, and reducing pain as being bad and pleasure as being good. Secondly, he accused Benatar of assigning positive value to non-existence. Now, these are not new criticisms and they have been refuted many times. Moreover, he admits frankly that he has not properly read Benatar before advertising his own course on ethics. So, a fairly poor attempt in my opinion. Four Corners of the Page is a channel that makes videos about books, and they made a video about Thomas Ligotti, who is one of those writers who write dark stories containing horror and humor in them. This video gives you a good idea of Ligotti's writings, and he includes some paragraphs verbatim. Now, over the years, I have been reading analytic philosophy, and that has been my gateway to antinatalism, veganism, animal rights, and so on. But still, if stories is what you like, then you may read Ligotti, and this video could be a good introduction to it. Another one is not a YouTube video, but a podcast of Dr. Douglas Stein, who is a physician in Florida, US. He's known as the vasectomist and has performed more than 45,000 vasectomies. He has taken his work internationally, including providing free procedures and in some cases even paying people to get vasectomized in countries like Philippines. In this episode, we get to know how Dr. Stein's work came to be, what his motivations are, and a whole lot about people's attitudes towards vasectomies. He is not an antinatalist. He has two daughters of his own. But his point is that once you have had the children that you want to have, after that and until you die, the best way to make sure that accidental pregnancies don't occur is to get vasectomized. And so he's helping thousands of men to go through this procedure. We also get to know his environmental stance and his views on what the ideal population of this planet is. And those were some of the stories this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.